So this is my presentation on word magic, and this is the first part, introduction to word magic. I've been wanting to do this series for quite a long time. Probably, I don't know, it's been in my head for about maybe the better part of 10 years. And when I actually put this series together, I was really surprised because it took me into some new places. I learned quite a few new things that I didn't anticipate. And I discovered some things along the way that I will reveal throughout the series that I think will be surprising. And hopefully you'll learn something. So I should say what this series is and what this series isn't. First of all, I'm not an expert in magic. I'm not an expert in linguistics or communications or anything like that. I'm just a student of the occult wisdom or esoteric, ancient psychology. Those things I find most interesting, and I like to look at how things are related and how we can draw from. I like to draw from different sources of seemingly different disciplines and show how they're actually related through an esoteric or occult perspective. So this is just my perspective. This isn't, what I have to say here. I'm not putting out there as some kind of, this is objective truth and everything else is just a bunch of crap. That's not the way I'm presenting this. This is just my perspective on this specific topic. And this is a very broad topic. I think that this might be the first series on word magic among maybe there might be a second full series in the future, because I feel like this is quite a broad topic, and I really want to get something out there that soon, right? I want to get something out there, and this should be released around Christmas time or the new year. My new series will come out on word magic. So I'm very excited. This has been about the better part of, I'd say, 6 to 8 months of really putting all of the pieces together. I'm still putting the pieces together. Today, in fact, I added a new section. Last weekend I added a new slide. Last weekend I added 2 full new sections. So I'm continuing to grow this presentation, and I think if you enjoyed my Silent Hill and Silent Hill 2 Secrets and Symbolism series, I think that you will enjoy this presentation. If you are drawn to the concepts of the self and the archetypes and the inner work, the shadow work, then I think that this is how I look at the world, right? And so if you enjoy that perspective, then I think this presentation is going to be enjoyable for you. At least I hope it is. I'm sure, like I said, I'm not an expert, so I'm sure I've made plenty of mistakes here and there along the way, so feel free to let me know. I don't claim to be an expert in any one given field, but I do like to bring things together and compare and show how these different areas are related and how we can use this in our lives. Because really for me, this isn't just a academic exercise. This is practical information that you can put into your life and you can see results. There's a lot of this information here that is very practical and really requires you to be fully engaged. It doesn't require you to be passive and to sit there. This may get you started, but really the intent of what I'm doing is just like the people that taught me and inspired me and shared experiences with me. You need to go out into the world and prove these concepts to yourself. And if it works for you, great. If it doesn't, then throw it away. So let's start with the second slide. So in this series, we will explore the magical operations that are hidden in the essence of language. We're going to study the origins. Now, when I say its origins, I mean the origins of magic and in how it relates to language or word magic. We're also going to look at how word magic influences our world today. I think I touch a little bit less on that last part. That might be a future series that we can go really into that. But I had so many aha moments and I learned so many new things looking at the history of magic and language and words. I was just blown away. So I think maybe this first series on word magic is primarily going to be some practical exercises, and also some history, a bit of a history lesson, but very surprising. It was very surprising to me. I had some presumptions about magic going into this that were completely shattered after doing some research here. So think about this for a moment. Have you ever looked up the definition of the word word? Right? That might sound ridiculous, right? But really think about that. Do you know what the word word means? Do you? Do you know? Right? I didn't know until, I don't know, 6 months ago, a year ago, right? And I'm not going to tell you. You can look it up. How about the definition of the word meaning, right? What does the word meaning mean, right? Chances are you may not have ever looked up what some of these words actually mean. Some of these words we take for granted every day. A word that maybe our teacher in school just tells us what it means, but we don't really look it up, right? So if that is the case, if you're anything like me, how many words have you been using that you don't really know the definitions for, right? Like me, the number is probably high. I'll give you a great example of a word that I misused for a long time, and I hear it all the time now. I was talking to really smart guy. He was there's this Japanese restaurant I used to go to all the time, and the owner's son, her son, just finished, really smart kid, and he went to, and when I say kid, he's probably like half my age. I can't remember what school. I think he went to school in Oregon, but he was a linguist, and he was very brilliant. And he was telling me, the word decimate. We were talking about words, and he was telling me the word decimate. People say, "Oh, the village was decimated. The football team, they got decimated." That means something was destroyed, right? It actually doesn't mean that at all. Decimate, coming from deca, right? The first part of that is to take the original use of the word to decimate was to decimate a population of a conquered nation. Like in Rome, they would take out 1 in 10 male children. So actually decimate doesn't mean to totally annihilate or destroy. It means 1 in 10. So 1 out of every 10 is taken out, right? I use that word my entire life like that, thinking it was, oh yeah, it was totally decimated, right? You hear it all the time. It's completely wrong. This isn't a presentation about, we're not going to go down the nerd word hole, right? Or the word, we're not word nerds, right? We're not going to go down the word nerd hole and get all into the, what's proper, what isn't, because that's not what this is about at all, right? If anything, this first slide anyway is about realizing, hey, if we're using these words and we really don't know what they mean, what's going on here, right? Like, why are we doing this? And what can we do to reach a higher awareness that we maybe look closer at the words we use and what they mean and where they come from, right? So this isn't, don't worry, this isn't an exercise in word nerdery. So what about the meaning of the word spell? Why does this word specifically have a double meaning? One meaning used for magic, and of course the other one used for language, right? Have you ever wondered that? I'll show a little bit later. The reasoning is basically because the origins of language and the written word comes from the time of myth and magic. So of course that would be a magical operation, right? But those magical operations are still with us, even though we live in the information age. And I'll show that, and I'll show plenty of examples later on in the presentation. So the funny thing about spells and magic and language is that once you begin to inspect them closely, they cease to have the same effect as they did before. It's only from this starting point that you will be able to learn the art of word magic. Okay, so you have to kind of raise your hand and go, okay, there's so many words I've been using that are, I don't know them. I really don't know what they mean. I just parrot them because I hear other people use them, and I just use, if you have that level of awareness and you're honest with yourself, you are ready. You're ready to delve into this series. So, like many words, the origin of the word spell comes from the time when the written word was created by the priest class, the magicians, or the magi, right? They did this exclusively. They were the lawgivers in ancient times at during the time when cuneiform, for example, one of the earliest writing systems we know of, came about, right? This was seen as a magical spell. Even though the English language is a far cry from the tongues of the name givers of ancient times, we're talking about the languages of Old Persian and of Northern India, Sanskrit, and the written languages of the written word of cuneiform and all of those languages. Even though our language, because English is just a hybrid, right, of German and French, and even though we're so far removed from Old Persian, those elements, the same elements of magic and energy that were there at that time, that were both perceived and in reality in the language, that magic and energy was carried through all ages of humanity and all of the subsequent languages that came out of the Indo-European languages of South Central Asia. So before we really explore this topic in detail, I want you to breathe. Take a moment to relax your mind. I feel like Morpheus right now. Just relax your mind, Neo. If you're feeling any resistance, or if you feel the urge to bring something you may already know to what I have to say, then try to let go of it. If you really want to get something out of this presentation, then you're going to have to just be open and let go, right? You can analyze it every which way to Sunday later. Just let go. This isn't the same thing as you have to accept what I'm saying. I don't want you to do that. Because I'll use this analogy. This is one of my favorite analogies from Alan Watts. I heard him say this once. He said, a mind that carries old ideas to a new place, right? So if you're bringing what you think you already know or what you already know to a new place, right? When you are listening to me or someone else, and you're bringing your old ideas to what they have to say, that's like crossing a river with a raft. And once you arrive at the other side of the river, you're still carrying the raft with you into the forest, right? You don't need the raft with you anymore. So if you come into this information and you really want to at least digest it somewhat, then you don't want to bring any old stuff with you. Bring the new to the new, right? There's nothing here for you to believe with this presentation, right? Nothing should be taken as gospel. Like I said, I'm not an expert in magic. I'm not an expert in words or linguistics. But just remember that a mind which is already full of its own ideas has little room for anything new, right? It happens all the time. I'm guilty of this. Sometimes I'll bring the old to the new and I don't learn anything, right? So I have to constantly remind myself, I have to bring the new to the new, which is be open. That's it. Doesn't mean you have to believe anything. So if you do learn something new from this presentation, please don't put your faith in it, right? Don't walk around going, well, I know this, because then you're just parroting, right? And what do we know about parroting? Well, if you parrot a bunch of words like decimate, you don't know what it means. Thankfully, with the word decimate, no one else knows that it doesn't mean what they think it means either, right? No one else knows that. They don't even know what it means, so you're good on that one. So don't feel embarrassed. Other words, maybe you're in trouble. Who knows? maybe you look silly. But decimate's one of the hidden ones. So this first section is an introduction to the origins of magic itself. Like, where did magic come from? What's the source of magic? And then the following 5 or so parts are going to outline the actual history and evolution of word magic. The remaining sections of this presentation will subsequently unpack each aspect of word magic itself. Now, I don't claim to have covered every aspect. In fact, I know I haven't. I know I haven't even come close. So this is just my very first presentation on word magic, and I know that there's a lot of things I don't know. Like, it's massive, right? So I also want to make sure that we talk about in detail we talk about examples, some practical advice, what you can do, because really this is all a bunch of crap unless you can use it in your life and make your life better. Because if you make yourself better, right, you make everyone around you better, you make your world better, right? But as the seeker, you must do that, within yourself first, right? So you have to put this to the test. This is the most important thing to remember, right? So I'm not interested in teaching anyone how to paint by the numbers, right? Or do it the way I do it. Because it works for me, therefore it must work for you. That's a bunch of crap, right? That's not going to help you. I don't know what's best for you, right? Only you know that. And the way to know what works and doesn't work is putting it to the test out into the world and seeing what works for you, what speaks to you, right? So throughout this entire presentation, we will look at various word meanings and their specific etymology. But like I said, we're not going to go down the word nerd hole, right? This isn't about that. But we're going to look at a lot of word etymologies, a lot of word meanings, because studying a word's etymology gives us many things. It gives us the definition, the history, and the truest sense of the word. The word etemos, maybe I'm mispronouncing that, probably, or etymos, comes from the Greek meaning true, real, or actual. And logia or logos means to study or speak of. Okay? Word etymology, very important. So this is a screenshot of my This is more or less my go-to etymology dictionary, etymonline.com. There's also some great Latin, Greek dictionaries online, and there's a few I haven't really found a great one yet. Maybe someone knows out there, but I've been looking for some Sanskrit ones too. So accepting a definition of a word from the dictionary without going any further is really not good enough if you want to heighten your awareness of the world around you and how you see the world, right? If one intends to uncover the truest meaning possible and better understand the power of word magic, the truest sense of the word must be understood, right? And when I say sense, I mean as in all five senses. I'll talk about in a future part of this presentation where one of the senses is integrally linked to how a word is created in the first place. So sense experience is, of course, no doubt, it's our most primary mode of understanding the world we have. It's the most fundamental way we navigate our reality, right? It brings us closer to the actual reality than words or language could ever hope to. Okay, so you got to remember that's like the primary driver that's going on here, right? That's something we're going to look at in great detail. So if that's true, then we know that language is merely a map. So language, words, right? It points to the general direction of reality. Words and language are not the actual reality itself, though, right? And this happens all the time. The world we live in is largely ruled by words, right? You can't do this or that, and there's all these restrictions and laws and right? It's all word magic. These laws and restrictions and comes down to the bottom line, of course. And these words have a lot of power, obviously, because they determine what you can do, what you can't do, how you think, and how you see the world. But before that, right, before the world of words, you must be able to trust your senses primarily, right? Because language is secondary. However superficial or non-primary language may be, okay, so having said all that about the importance of your sense experience first and language being second, if you approach this subject properly, if you approach it in a way from starting with your senses and then standing behind the words and looking at them from behind or under the floorboards, as it were, right? Then it will often reveal something about primary reality which could not be understood just by a word definition alone, right? Here's a quote by Rachel Barney. She's the author of Oxford Studies in Ancient Philosophy. And this is what she says about etymology versus definitions. She says, giving an etymology is thus a matter of unwrapping or decoding a name to find the message the name givers have placed inside. And that message is inside so many words today that have come from us from Old Persian, from Sanskrit, from just, from thousands upon thousands of years, right? It's still with us. That's the essence of word magic. So if you're curious about a word, start thinking in terms of, gosh, I've been using this word all the time. Do I really know what it means? It could be the most simple word, right? Look up the etymology. You'll be amazed. So first, it must be understood that magic as we know it, as we understand it, originated in Persia or in the region of modern-day Iran. The priest class of that time were known as the Magi, from which we derive the words magic, magician, and magistrate. In this book from Stephen E. Flowers entitled Original Magic, The Rituals and Initiations of the Persian Magi, the author explores the origins of magic, including its rituals and ceremonies. Now, the Magi, if you go to the Bible, the Magi, of course, were highly regarded in the ancient world as expert astrologers, prophets, as well as lawgivers by the divine authority of God, right? They weren't the authors. We'll talk about what the word authority means a little bit later. But the Magi were merely the lawgivers and not the original authors. Spells at that time were set in stone or cast into a mold, right? So you cast a spell, right? This is where we get this term, from which the laws or pronouncements were displayed publicly throughout the kingdom, right? Such laws were said to have been derived or authored by the divine, right? They weren't coming from man per se, but they had to have come from the divine, especially in the East, because in the East, to realize your higher self is to realize your own divinity, and you yourself are essentially God essence, right? That's a foreign idea in the West. It's a very scary idea to even say such a thing in the West, right? So to understand this history of authorship, and we're going to talk a little bit more about, don't worry, we're going to talk a little bit more about the origins of magic from Persia and the old religions from that time. So don't worry, I'm not glossing over that. So to understand this history of authorship and how the divine pronouncements have traveled through the ages, we need to understand the roots of our own language, right? This is a great illustration here of the Indo-European language family. All of the languages of Europe and the British Isles are part of this Indo-European language family, originating in Persia and India, as you can see here at the root here of this tree. Not only were all languages in the Western world derived from our big brother to the east, but our form of religion, government, and laws were also derived from Persia. A land which develops its language and writing first is logically going to develop its philosophy, law, and religions first, right? The oldest empire in the world, as known to the West, as known to the Greeks, was, of course, the empires between Persia and Turkey, right? So there's this idea that philosophy just kind of spontaneously erupted out of Greece or came from Egypt, right? But this idea has been proven to be false. The fundamental structure of the Western worldview came about from religious monotheism, right? That's not a big surprise. Monotheism itself originated from the teachings of the prophet Zarathustra, from which the ancient Persian Zoroastrian religion was founded. You could say he was the original magi, in a way. Maybe. Maybe some religious experts would disagree. That's fine. It was this theology from Zoroastrianism, from the prophet Zarathustra, which subsequently led to the creation of Christianity and Islam, of which Judaism served as a conduit. It has been historically noted that the tribes of Israel and the Zoroastrians of old Persia they lived right next to each other for a long time. They shared their wisdom and share a historic kinship with one another. To this day, and I'll also talk about this a little bit later, but to this day, there's over 30,000 Jews in Iran, and there are dozens of mosques there, and those families, some of those families have been there for a very long time, right? That's something you don't hear about, but you can look it up. It's uncertain exactly how much influence the tribes of Israel and the Zoroastrians had on each other, right? We don't know for sure. But the fact remains that the Christian worldview is more heavily influenced from the ancient traditions of Persia than those from the Hebrews. I know that's a bold statement, but throughout the presentation, I will show how some of these, some of the religious ideas of old Persia through the Zoroastrians and the Mithraic traditions, how they align pretty close, and how many of these religious stories from the religions of old Persia were kind of repackaged by Christianity. And we will see this. There's no doubt that Judaism was a massive influence on Christianity. Jesus was a Jew, of course. But the religious philosophy that you find in Judaism, there's a lot of sharing going on between many different religions. After all, Judaism is a religion that is first and foremost a religion of knowledge and wisdom, right? Whereas Christianity is something different. We'll talk about kind of the difference and the flip a little bit later. So it's interesting to note that both some Hebrew and Hindu religious leaders alike, they've both I've seen this on the internet during my research. They've claimed that the prophet Zarathustra belonged to their own respective religions. Some say he was Jewish. Some say that he was a Hindu, right? These may be more politically motivated claims, however, given the state of our world today, right, than anything else. But the prestige associated with the Magi of Persia was also used to lend legitimacy to the story of Christ's birth, right, the three Magi. So after all, it was the three Magi from the Bible which prophesied the birth of Christ in the first place. After following the Star of Bethlehem into the kingdom of King Herod, the Magi were asked by the king to inform him of the whereabouts of this newborn king, should they succeed in finding him. Of course, the Magi found him, but they never told King Herod of the whereabouts of the baby Jesus, right? The Magi are depicted in this fresco in the upper left-hand corner wearing the red Phrygian cap. This was meant to signify they were free men from the east. So there was quite a lot of cachet at that time. If you had the Magi in your story, you pretty much, that was your ticket, right? For this young, burgeoning faith that we call Christianity, right? Hi, this is the end of this part of the video. Stay tuned for the continuation next week. If you enjoy what I'm doing, please subscribe, hit the like button, and feel free to add your comments as well. Thanks so much for watching. See you next week.